All right, everyone. So welcome back to the show. Honored today to have Mark Bell as a guest. I've actually been following his social media stuff for quite a while now, and he's like a very interesting guy with a lot of knowledge to share. So Mark, welcome to the show.
If you've been following me, then you know that I'm on a 10-minute walk right now.
Yeah, which is totally okay. So yeah, I wanted to, Mark has a long resume of stuff. I'll post it in the description, so we'll kind of just jump right in. Mark, I wanted to kind of get your perspective on any kind of advice you have for people that are trying to find their health again in America, you know? So it's, I think like more confusing than ever these days. Like for example,
Right.
I grew up on a biodynamic farm in Ukraine, and when I came to America, I foolishly believed like everyone grew food that way, you know. So I didn't even question I didn't even know what industrial agriculture was, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, like 4 years ago, I embarked on a journey to try to find like quote unquote natural food, the way we kind of grew food on that biodynamic farm in Ukraine. And to me, it became like almost impossible. I mean, it took like a tremendous amount of research to even be able to source like quote unquote natural food. So I presume people experience that in a wide variety of health topics. So I was wondering if I can kind of get your perspective in terms of how you overcame injuries in the past, maybe some mentors that helped you, what kind of diets and you've tried to implement as well, and all that stuff. So
Great. Yeah, staying attached to your fitness might be the single greatest thing that you ever try to venture into, because it's part of a category of something that I would refer to as personal development. And the acquisition of knowledge and then dumping that knowledge into your day-to-day life is called wisdom. And the more wisdom that we build up, the more resilient that we can be. And resilience is a key factor to being able to survive and thrive and live a long and prosperous life. If you think about a child and a child's development, and even just how sometimes people are like, man, kids are wild, man. They get sick and then they're totally fine, like a day later, 2 days later, something that would wipe an adult out usually, you know. You take another example with kids is that people are like, oh man, when I was a kid, I could eat whatever I wanted. I didn't have any problem with carbs. Well, children don't necessarily, they could, depending on, there's many health observations that you can come to understand how a human can become more insulin resistant or just deal with carbohydrates less over time. But basically, children and adults are both human beings, and we both deal with food in very similar ways. It's just that children move a lot. They stay attached to their fitness without even really noticing it or knowing it. Think about a baby that's going from crawling to walking. Could you imagine the amount of calories that are burned up in comparison to how much food that baby eats in a day calorically? Like it's probably, I don't know, I'm just going to make up a number, but it probably represents 20 or 30%. As an adult, you can exercise almost as much as you want, and it's hard to even tap into burning 10% of your calories. My point here is that you have to stay attached to your fitness, because when you're a kid and you're moving around that much, that is what's helping you chew up some of those carbohydrates, some of the fruit punch that you would drink, and some of the Cheetos that you would eat, and some of these other things. It's not because you're a kid that you were staying thin or not gaining weight. It was because you moved a bunch. So you have to figure out a way to move a lot. And then if we break that down and say, what's a simple way for people to move a lot? Well, how about we lower the barrier of entry into movement? And let's say not everybody has to be a power lifter, not everybody has to be a bodybuilder, but let's figure out some reasonable ways to move every single day. And one of the easiest things to do, or simplest things to do, is just to walk. And if you can walk multiple times a day, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day, for whatever amount of minutes you can allocate to it, that's going to be a big advantage in staying connected to your fitness and just living a lifestyle where you're burning some calories. Your actual calorie intake, like what you eat, is also going to be a massive factor, but in my opinion, just way more difficult to rein in, and takes a crazy amount of practice. So walking is great. And then from there, we need one more component, because if you can build up some muscle mass, you can really do yourself a lot of favors. It's a nice investment for the future. Lifting weights burns calories in the future. How cool is that? Because when you lift weights and you have muscle mass on your body, for every time that you gain muscle, you are gaining the ability to burn more calories, to eat more food, to get away with having a few more drinks or eating an extra bowl of ice cream here and there, and not having it really impact you super negatively, or have it show up on your body, which is, by the way, you know, one thing to keep in mind, I'll just kind of end with this, let you get into your next question, but the single greatest thing you can do for your health is to drop body fat. So people need to really, that's why it's so important to stay attached to your fitness. The single greatest thing you can do for yourself is to drop body fat. There's so much research on this. Just not being fat is the key to fitness.
Yeah, I also found on the CDC website, like basically like males over 15% body fat, especially males over 25% body fat, which are obese, basically have like a 300 to 500% greater chance of like complications from COVID, just from being that overweight, you know?
Well, and you bring up a great point. Like, hey, you know, just don't be over 25% body fat. Like, I realize people struggle, and I realize people have a hard time. I also understand there's psychological issues that people are dealing with. My mom dealt with that her whole life, and she's gone. She died at 69 years old. And I've had other people in the family get sick and have all kinds of issues. So it hits close to home for me too. I'm not, you know, I'm empathetic towards it. I understand it. But look, man, the message is simple. Just don't be fucking fat. You know, just figure out a way. Like, I don't mean to sound like crass or whatever, but like, it's the truth, man. You got to make a decision. And if you think about what are the top 5 ways to just not be fat, it might be easier than you trying to think about being skinny, because really your requirement is like, hey, you know what? Let me just stop this snowball effect of gaining weight. Like, forget about losing weight. Let me just see if I can not gain it anymore. Because every holiday, I mean, if you're a big person in general and you're graduate high school and you're 250 pounds and you're a male, if you just stayed 250 pounds, you'd probably be okay. Like, you probably wouldn't be like 250 pounds is not like, you know, it's not that next level. You're not wearing 3 and 4X shirts and stuff like that. So how can, you know, what are some of the top ways you can just be less fat? One is through movement. I just think movement is superior. And the only reason why I say movement is superior is because the food part of it, it just takes so damn long. The movement part of it can happen right now. The food part of it, it's going to take you a while. For you to turn every meal into a good decision is going to take you probably a decade. For you to get outside and walk, you could do that right now and have that done in 10 minutes, right? So that's kind of my own personal belief. But getting back to what you said about people being 25%, you know, what are some ways we can be less fat? Well, let's have some movement going on. Let's do some sort of resistance training so we can have some muscle mass, because that will help augment our body. And that will allow us, in occasions where we want to overeat, it will allow for us to kind of auto-regulate that and auto-correct on that. And then also let's talk about eating. The best way to regulate the amount of food that you eat is not to weigh it. It's not to have a set amount of calories every day. Not to track everything that you eat. It's quite simply to eat more protein. There's not one thing on the planet that you can point to me and show me that's unhealthy for you, that has a shit ton of protein in it. It doesn't exist. Think about all the foods that you know about. What's really high in protein that's bad for you? So if you just went protein minded and you went protein first, you'd be out ahead of the pack. And there's actually research that shows if you have protein and fat meal about a half an hour before you eat, you guys can try this trick, guys that listen to this. Have a protein and fat meal, mix the whey protein shake with a little bit of extra virgin olive oil or something like that, or even like a little bit of peanut butter. I think olive oil might work a little bit better. About 30 minutes prior to a meal. And if you can test this out with a continued glucose monitor, what you eat after that 30 minutes later has less of an impact on you from a glucose perspective. It doesn't necessarily mean that you get away with eating whatever you want and you're not going to get fat. But protein is the ultimate, because what protein does is it leverages you to, in general, eat less, but it also helps the protein and fat can also help stabilize the blood sugar. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that can be made out of simply just loading up on protein. And if you want to try to figure it out on your own, just go 1 gram per pound of body weight. Weigh 200 pounds, have 200 grams of protein per day. And you're going to notice, especially over time, over weeks and months, it will stuff down your hunger and stuff down your cravings to the point where you get really focused and honed in on your diet.
Yeah, I've noticed, especially with my fat loss clients, the second you basically transition them into like 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, like you said, or maybe 1.1, depending on whatever their goal.
Yeah.
Immediately they probably eat, as compared to the standard American diet, like 30% less calories, just because they feel so much fuller. I don't know if you've experienced that with any of your.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of times we think we're going on a diet and we think you have to eat a bunch of food that we don't like, but take a pen and some paper and write down 20 of your favorite foods that sound reasonable to eat and lose weight. I'm sure you have some different forms of lean meat on there. Maybe steak or something wouldn't be on there because maybe some people are still fearful of eating too much fat or something like that. But that myth has been debunked a million times over. But I would imagine you would have meat, fruit, and vegetables on there. Maybe some people might like some almonds or cashews or macadamia nuts or something, but for the most part, everybody's list is going to look about the same. Some people might lean into the vegetables more than the meat. But when you have options in terms of like eating some chicken thigh, eating some potatoes, eating some apples, eating some strawberries, having spinach, arugula, cheese. I mean, look, man, I don't know what more you want. Like this, these foods can be and there's so many different versions of cookbooks out there that talk about healthy eating and give you the calories. And they're like, hey, pop it in your oven, takes 10 minutes or whatever, 20 minutes. There's a lot of great options out there. And you can, like, if you can't figure these things out and you're like, just don't know how to cook and don't know where to start with a carnivore diet. Just eat meat all the time. And then we get into your zone of like some of this factory farming stuff. And that is something to be conscious of. But again, I have to go back to this. One of the greatest things you can do for yourself is just to not be fat. If you want to figure things out, I would figure things out after you figured out how to be less fat, because otherwise you're probably going to be dead and you're going to be of no use, or you'll be sick. So figure that out by any means necessary, whatever way you got to do it. And then you want to start figuring out grass-fed organic beef and you want to know where the meat is sourced and everything. Great, go for it. Or if you can afford that while you're on your mission, then great. But anything, you have to be careful, because anything that you put in your way is going to be in your way and it's going to slow you down. I'll give you an example. A lot of people don't floss their teeth, but a lot of people will brush their teeth. I would say probably a good percentage of Americans brush their teeth twice a day. It's what we were taught since we were little, pounded into our heads, which, by the way, you might not have to brush at all if you have the correct diet. but that's another topic. So you brush your teeth twice a day, but a lot of people don't floss. Why don't they floss? They don't floss simply because the floss is in the drawer and it's not out where the toothbrush is.
Mm-hmm.
Take your floss and put it next to the toothbrush, and now you have a good game plan to make sure that you're flossing every day. So how do we take stuff like that and put that into our day-to-day when it comes to nutrition? For me, that means I don't care if you stop at McDonald's or In-N-Out Burger and get a burger without the bun, or you stop at your favorite restaurant. Be less fat by any means necessary.
Gotcha. Well, to kind of touch on some topics in terms of, I don't have enough time. One, I actually don't know how to cook even to this day, but one thing that has worked really well for me was basically probably like your schedule. It's very like automated. I get up, I do emails for like 30 minutes to get my body woken up. Then I go for a 20-minute walk as my part of my warm up. Then I do my workout. Right after my workout is done, I put whatever my meat. I also eat some jasmine white rice as well. So I put the meat in the mini oven, like a $40 mini oven I bought from, or toaster oven I bought from Walmart basically. And then I put the rice in the rice cooker. While that's cooking, I'm taking a shower and getting ready for the day. And then right when I'm done with my shower, my food is ready for the whole entire day. So it's like almost zero time investment. It requires literally zero cooking skills. And I just have like good seasoning that I put on the meat and some butter maybe in the rice, and then it's like a done deal. So it's not too hard. Do you get any people
that's awesome,
that kind of come at you and they're like, oh, this is too much meat. Why am I not having a lot more like grains in my diet? Because I hear that often when I give those recommendations sometimes.
Yeah, I hear it a lot too. And the truth is that I don't think I think number one, we don't really truly know exactly the exact, correct human diet, but we can speculate upon, what we were supposed to eat and what we lived on. And then now we can speculate on what we thrive on. And I would imagine that we thrive on a little bit of a variety. So I would agree with a lot of those people that say, hey, like, why aren't I eating a piece of fruit? Well, fruit or vegetables are not really that problematic, in my opinion, for most people. There's some people that might have issues with fructose or issues with some of the stuff that's in vegetables, oxalates and different things like that. But for the most part, you're not going to get fat. Again, we got to go back to the get fat thing. Like, how do we figure out how to not get fat? One way to not get fat is to have some fiber in your diet, because fiber can be filling as well, just like protein can be. Mm-hmm. And I think that protein and fiber, to me, they're very similar. I don't think that protein should count as a calorie the way that a lot of people don't count fiber as a calorie. But to your point, a lot of people will kind of argue, but the truth here is that we don't need dietary carbohydrates. The human body doesn't really need them. You may feel like you require them because you need them for something specific or you have specific goals, but you don't really need to eat you don't need to outsource your carbohydrates. I personally have found that eating a little bit of carbs goes a long way. So if I have 30 grams or 50 grams a day, it helps to keep me out of ketosis, which is kind of in my opinion, kind of a starvation mode that your body kind of gets into to protect itself, so you don't lose muscle mass, which could be viewed as being good. But I don't think like not eating carbs forever is necessarily a great idea. Although I will say that you can, as I pointed out earlier, you can survive just fine that way. Mm-hmm. But can you thrive that way? That's maybe an individual thing, right?
I always wondered, like, the human race has been around in various forms. I think there have been like 29 species, like variations of the human race that have come and gone over the years. But I think like the Homo sapien has been around for at least like 200,000 years in my understanding. And basically, before the advent of farming and cultivation of basically like grains and domesticated animals, what else for those 190,000 years do they have available to eat? They had basically like wild game, wild fish, like seasonal fruits sometimes.
Right.
And then like occasionally whatever wild like vegetable or crop they found from time to time. And I'm pretty sure that was like, I mean, people oftentimes don't understand that there are basically like no calories in like non-starchy vegetables, you know?
Yeah. Also, what about, you know, what about like not having a refrigerator, and
Yeah, or that.
you have to go hunt your food, and like you and I go out and we try to kill something and we miss it, and then we go and we try again and we like can't get the caribou or whatever it is that we're like hunting, whatever it is that we're after. Just in walking alone and then maybe running and throwing and whatever else we were trying to do, we may have burned, a lot of calories for that day, to the point where we're so tired that we can barely hunt the next day. It's not like that anymore. You just get up and go to your pantry and grab some cookies, and you have 50 grams of sugar in. I mean, I think the timing of stuff too is really important. Like you might go through 50 grams of sugar in like 30 seconds or something, or maybe like, well, even just to say 2 minutes, right? That's a huge amount to deal with. Like how, there's no scenario where that would ever really happen in nature. I mean, I guess maybe you might be able to get some honey, but like you would get such small amounts of it. I can't even think of a scenario where there's like anything that would. Now, eating 100 grams of protein and eating 100 grams of fat in one sitting, that probably happened all the time. And that's what people point out to be dangerous. Oh, you can't eat that much protein. That's bad for your kidneys. It's like, are you kidding me? You're going to come at me with that when I just saw you suck down that thing of apple juice, thinking you're healthy with the apple juice? Like,
hi everyone, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Evgeny Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Again, I think some of these, some of this stuff has been demonized. I think the carnivore diet's wonderful. I've had friends lose well over 200 pounds on the carnivore diet, completely turn their lives around. I myself have lost 100 pounds between keto and carnivore. I used to be 330, and nowadays I'm 230 wearing a size 34 pants, when before my pants were like 44, So I've made a lot of huge strides on it, and I couldn't imagine doing it any other way. And I've done it with eating a large amount of protein and then factoring in other energy sources from there. So I consider fat and carbohydrates to be energy sources. I don't consider protein to be an energy source. So eat up your protein and eat up your fiber, and maybe it also, get in healthy amounts of fat every day. Not necessarily healthy fats, because I don't really distinguish between saturated and omega-3 and stuff, but get in fats and get your fiber in, get your protein in. And then if there's some room, to have a piece of cake, have some ice cream, eat some potatoes or whatever, I think that's fine. Like if you want to do it just from a psychological standpoint, shit, man, I think go for it. Like if you have, first of all, if you don't have a lot of health issues, then you might be able to go 70-30 on your diet and look great and enjoy yourself and have a couple beers and stuff like that. If you're somebody that has issues and you're somebody that is overweight, you probably need to go more like 90-10 or 95-5 for a while. You need to like try to make the right decision almost all the time, except for maybe like once a week where you let up a tiny bit. But that's the truth of it. I mean, if you're dumb, you need to go to the library, if you're really smart, right? Yeah, or the internet. Yeah, but if you're really smart, it's like you don't really need to read more books. You just need to act, and so that's my life. I grew up with learning disabilities, kind of thinking I was dumb, and I had to work on that other side of me, probably for more hours than somebody who grew up who just kind of understood stuff a little bit better, and that's totally fine. For somebody else, they might have to work in the gym. There's hard gainers, right? There's people that we know that train hard, and it's like legitimately very difficult for them to gain an ounce of muscle. And you're like, I don't know what's wrong with this guy, but that's life. That's the way it is. We're dealt a certain deck of cards, and I believe we all have an ace in our deck of cards, but it takes a long time to discover it and find it.
Yeah, and some credit to you, Mark. I mean, some people would be like, oh, it can't be just as easy as just walking a few times a day and changing up your diet. But you got to also remember, like, basically, like these hunter-gatherers, before the cultivation of crops, basically, like they didn't have a Bally's membership. They didn't have like vaccines or medicine. They didn't have like a life coach or nutritionist or like a personal trainer. And they're all jacked like all year round. Sure, they had probably physical injuries. And if you take out child mortality, basically they lived into like 50 or 60 as well, from my understanding, basically doing what you're talking about. Just kind of, they're walking around searching for food all day, which is kind of reinforcing your idea of just going for frequent walks. And then what are they eating? They're eating basically wild game, wild fish, and wild crops of various sorts. That's literally it.
You trying to tell me that they didn't have a bunch of fitness apps on their smartphone?
No, they didn't. They definitely probably didn't track their steps. Although I'm pretty sure for corporate wellness, they would exceed the corporate wellness requirements, for the amount of steps per day.
Yeah, I think they were up in the from some of the stuff I've heard, they were kind of more in the 20,000 range. And I think a lot of people are trying to get 10,000 steps in a day. But I think just to make up for the boxes that we live in, and just all the shelter that we have, all the conveniences of everything's climate controlled. You, God forbid, it's hot in your car for 10 seconds, or cold in the grocery store for 20 seconds. Like, we're not used to any of that, but all that stuff used to make us burn calories because you had to adjust to it, and your body had to, make you shiver when you're cold and so forth. And so you got to move a lot. And here's the catch. There's always a catch, right? There's always a little thing in there that gets you. And I think here's what gets you is that if you haven't moved in a long time and you dug yourself a hole and you're very heavy, you're not going to want to move. Like, the desire to move, there's no desire to move. And so this is where we get into this situation of, try not. Like, you can't try to be less fat. You have to be less fat. And in order to do that, I think where we have it twisted sometimes is that we think that we're going to lose weight and become healthy, but we need to be healthy first in order to lose weight. So right now, for some people that are listening, they need to just hang on to this little bit of hope that if they can just get something going for just a couple days in a row, that they will start to feel, I promise you'll start to feel better. Now, it might take like 2-3 weeks though, but 2 or 3 weeks is only 14 to 20 days or so. And then you won't say, oh shit, I have to walk. You're going to say, oh, I want to walk. Like, you're going to have a need to walk, not to be less fat, but your brain is going to have a need to walk, because your brain's going to be like, that shit's really good for me. I love the way that feels. Let's hit up that walk. And you know what? Let's walk a little further today. Let's go a little faster today. But the real catch here is that when people are really heavy, they don't want to move. It kind of reminds me of when someone's bipolar or somebody has mental health issues and you try to tell them to calm down. It's like, well, that's not a great thing to tell somebody. They don't have the capacity. So for me to preach and for me to talk about a 10-minute walk is a little bit like a fuck you sometimes to these people that are really heavy because they're paralyzed. But I understand that, and I've seen that happen. You have to make the conscious decision to recognize that you can do at least a little bit of what I'm saying. You can at least meet me halfway, and you can at least get going on this. And once you get going on this, you'll have momentum. And once you get that momentum going, you're never going to want to take a step back.
Yeah, and also like, I mean, sure, it's hard to make those lifestyle changes, but it's also like very hard to be very overweight. People forget that as well. And I would say like a lot harder overall, in the grand scheme of things, than taking the actions like you're talking about. And it's not easy to not only deal with the health problems of being overweight, but also like the social stigma of being overweight and the kind of the limits it imposes on you, like the ripple effect of limits it imposes on you throughout every single aspect of your day and your life. And I don't mean that as a disrespectful way. I just mean that in the sense that, yes, it's hard to sometimes change your lifestyle and et cetera, and go for 10-minute walks and adopt a better diet for sure. But it's also not easy, and I'd say a lot harder just to stay overweight. Just something to give thought to. And yeah, I mean, to reinforce what you said, a lot of people, they view like fat gain as a standalone issue, but it's important to also perceive it as like a symptom. It's like, what is it a symptom of? It's usually like Paul Chek has a really good program on this 1, 2, 3, 4 overcoming obesity and disease. I think it's like one of the best programs that outlines the etiology of weight gain. And I mean, in short, I'll summarize it quickly. Is basically, what is fat gain a symptom of? It's a symptom of poor lifestyle and nutrition choices that are a symptom of a belief system that doesn't facilitate health conscious choices, obviously. And then that is a symptom of like 3 things. So there's like a love-hate relationship, there's a story gap in the person's life, and then there's also a sense of emptiness. And I would say a 4th variable would be, I don't know how you feel about this today, but I feel like just like sickness and disease has been like normalized in America. Because I feel like pretty much anywhere you go, like literally anywhere you go outside, like 9 out of 10 people you run into are like in physical and mental pain, like full of obesity and disease. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, 100%. And, the entire thing is based upon a belief system that's not true. You think I'm going to eat this and it's going to make me feel better. Well, it does kind of work.
That's the annoying thing, because you do get a lot of dopamine and you get a lot of things going on in your brain, and it does make you feel wonderful. You did get that taste that you were looking for. Like, I love peanut butter cups, and you get that kind of crunchy peanut butter flavor that you were looking for from that peanut butter cup. It does satisfy that urge, that need for that peanut butter cup. But where the lie is that that's not the promise that you tried to make to yourself yesterday or the day before. Like, you told yourself you were going to be something different, and now here you are doing the same thing again. And to make matters even worse, we can be kind of masochistic with ourselves. We can be coercive with ourselves and say, like, hey, you better do this by this time or else, and then we put a lot of our self-worth into there, and it's extremely damaging. And next thing you know, that person, is not getting around people as much as they used to. I know we got the COVID situation, but like in general, people that get heavy, you won't find pictures of them. You don't see them smile as much. And it's just, it's a downward spiral in terms of your health. I'd like for people to, let's not lower the standard of what a human being is supposed to be. Let's raise it up and let's keep it high, and let's be made out of something different than everybody else. I look at some elderly people and the grandmas and grandpas and stuff. I walk around town all the time. I observe people all the time. And these people are really, like, they get a pass because they're older and no one wants to talk about it. And everyone's like, well, they're not that fat. But I disagree. Like, they have a lot of excess body fat on them. Mm-hmm. That is just, it's not providing them with any more health. It's not giving them anything extra to be more vibrant or to live a more powerful life. And I'm also a believer in, like, look, man, yeah, we can have some leeway, like, you don't have to be ripped. But I also think along those same lines, you don't have to be excessively fat. I have a few friends that are pretty tall, still pretty young, and they just have excessive amounts of body fat on them. I'm just like thinking to myself, I understand how this happens. I get it. But do you need to be 150 pounds overweight or 100 pounds? Like, can you get to be, 20 pounds overweight or 30 pounds overweight? Can we get below that 25% body fat? Like, I just don't think for a male,
I just don't think that's too much to ask. And you brought up Paul Chek. I mean, I don't think Paul Chek is young, and he looks great. So I think people need to get over this whole thing of like, this is just me,
This is just my genetics. It's like, man, the likelihood that it's your genetics is really, really slim to none almost. The likelihood that it's your environment and your choices and your mindset is probably, it's most likely through the roof. So let's explore that. And let's see, like, were you ever skinny? Like, here's two things to think about. A, were you ever skinny in your life? And B, have you ever lost weight before? If you were ever skinny, then you could work your way towards something similar. Maybe it'd be hard to get back to the way you looked when you're 20 if you're 60. That's totally understandable for many, many reasons. But have you ever lost weight before? Because if you lost weight before, 10 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds, then you have showed yourself in the past that you understand the process. However, you made a large mistake because you thought there was something wrong with the way that you thought about it. There's something wrong with the way that you went about it. And in my opinion, you went about it by saying, I'm just going to eat less. Well, when you only eat less, you become less. Think about, like, you're trying to fuel a system to get you to do more and to be more and to be more, to just have a more inspired life. But how can you be inspired without any fuel? It doesn't make any sense. That's why I said earlier, it's centered around this belief system that's fake. You need to fuel yourself. You need to fuel yourself with good nutrients. And for those people that are listening to this, I really would love for you to try this for the next 2 weeks. Eat meat and eggs, and cheese even, until your heart's content for the next 2 weeks. Just go at it. Eat as much meat as you can, and just go for it. Over the course of those 2 weeks, by the time you get to day number 3 or 4, you're going to be pretty bogged down by the amount of food you're getting because of what I mentioned earlier about the protein leveraging. It's going to start to balance out your hunger. What'll happen in the second week is your taste buds will be recalibrated, and you'll understand the actual flavor of food, because we lost that. I don't think people have any idea how good spinach tastes just by itself, or how good raw almonds with no salt or anything. I don't think people even understand that has flavor. That is popping with tons of flavor if you pull flavor away from you. So give that a try, and don't worry about the amount of food. Just worry about the quality of food. The quantity of food, when you make the right food choices, will take care of itself. If you want to find out a lot more information on that, you can look at some stuff that I've talked about on my YouTube channel, which is Mark Smelly Bell, or look up the king of this stuff is Ted Neiman. He has amazing research on this kind of stuff, and he has a whole book about protein leveraging that outlines all of it.
Well, yeah, regarding your comment about genetics, sure, some people have, a slower metabolism that I feel they could correct with weightlifting, as you mentioned in the beginning, bump it up quite a bit by just adding lean muscle to their body. But I also say some people, the myths are I can't burn calories or something like that, or I can't lose weight because of my thyroid, or my hormones are all messed up, or I'm in starvation mode. I always kind of tell them, look, man, if I went and dropped you off in the middle of the forest without food or water and came back in 1 month, you'd be like a toothpick,
Right.
So it's what happened to the starvation mode? What happened to the genetics? How come? I don't know if you hear that often. I hear that quite a bit. I just can't lose weight no matter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You hear people make up all kinds of stuff, but it's really just things to guard themselves. Just trying to guard themselves away from the truth, being heavy, or even maybe even equally as embarrassing as having having something wrong with you from a health perspective. That's why the doctors and stuff aren't allowed to share your information with other people, because it can be embarrassing. People are ashamed that they have this, even if it's you start to lose your eyesight. It could be the littlest thing, but you feel like you feel like it's your fault, you know? And when it comes to gaining body fat and it comes to becoming unhealthy like that, it's not all your fault. Like you're a huge factor in the whole thing, but it's a combination of a lot of things. Maybe when you were young, somebody didn't handle it correctly when you would eat bad food. Maybe they said, hey, you know what? You're fat enough. You need to put that down. And it's like, well, shit, man, of course that person's going to have some issues with food, you know? Like that's a shitty, I didn't grow up with that, so I don't know what that's like. So of course people are going to be heavy from that. The factor here is to understand that nobody makes you do anything. So even though somebody may have, quote unquote, made you feel a certain way, and it may have caused some psychological damage, those are all things that you adopted and you kept, and you harbored those things. And you can get yourself out of those things too, because it's all about how you interpret what they said. Look at kids that are abused, or situations where a dad walked out on a family. I always talk about Shaquille O'Neal. His dad walked out on him when he was young, and he said, "You're gonna know." Shaquille was like, "You're gonna know who I am. You're gonna know my name. You don't want anything to do with me, but like, you're gonna find out a lot about me, because I'm gonna be a determined son of a bitch, and you're gonna learn about me." So he went on to become famous, and his dad kind of tried to come back into the picture and stuff like that, but that was his interpretation of his dad leaving, where somebody else might say, oh, you know, like, I grew up without a dad. I don't know how to be a man, and I don't know how to take care of myself, and I don't know.
Mark, right? You want to break it up just a little bit, just letting you know. I think you're further away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So a lot of it comes down to your interpretation. And, you know, you got one person might think like their dad walked out on them, and they might think they can never be loved again by somebody, or they did something wrong. The other person might just think, you know what, I'm going to use that as fuel. And that's going to be fuel to help me get ahead of people. And when I'm a dad, I'm going to be a super dad. I'm not going to be a dad like that. And so, you know, you got different ways of interpreting things. And I think ultimately that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and there's a really, outside of Paul Chek's 1, 2, 3, 4, Overcoming Obesity and Disease, which addresses what you mentioned, there's also a really great author, Dr. Stefan Wolinski. He's like the founder of quantum psychology. And basically, I mean, in short, basically, you know how you have like a thought, and then you have like the spaciousness, and then another thought pops up, you know?
Right.
And then in between thoughts, there's like this unknown black hole of basically spaciousness. So in short, I mean, his interpretation is like basically objective reality has no meaning until you put meaning on it. So oftentimes people use this spaciousness, and depending on their, you know, programming, like basically childhood programming, in his case, in the womb, they would sense this spaciousness and they would interpret it as emptiness. In an example, you know, in one example, they would interpret that emptiness as like lack of adequacy, like I'm inadequate. So that would be like their false core, and then they would interpret. Then they would try to overcompensate. So by becoming extra adequate, you know, like being very successful, etc., whatever their interpretation of adequacy is. But then it's setting up a cascade of events, because now you've reached an incorrect hypothesis, and you base your entire personality on that incorrect hypothesis. So you can't come up with an answer, which basically leads you into a misalignment of your core values, which leads you into the relationships you don't want to be in, the work environment you don't want to be in. Also, maybe a sense of emptiness, which leads to, you know, like a lot of stress in the body, which leads to a belief system that doesn't facilitate health conscious choices, which leads to poor lifestyle and nutrition choices, which then leads to weight gain. So it's a pretty good, like very clear etiology chart. I highly recommend it for anyone. That way, it's like when you have these things, like these uncontrollable things of like, oh, I can't stop eating, you at least have like a blueprint of you can follow, like, why is this happening, you know? And then if you're honest with yourself and you do, you know, the deep research of educating yourself and then doing that trial and error in the real world, I really feel like literally anyone with maybe 1 or 2 good mentors here and there can find their health and become like very healthy and like feel great mentally and physically.
It's amazing that, like, when you talk about obesity, I don't really hear people talk about this side of it enough. Most often where you find obesity, and some people would say 100%, but when you find kind of severe obesity, you're going to find trauma. I've actually had friends where I've had conversations with them. Yeah, I waited a while. It wasn't like I said it on day one when we met, but after getting to know them better, I would just kind of say, hey, man, like, why don't you tell me what really happened? And they're like, huh? I'm like, well, what really happened? Like, there's probably something that happened, because like, just a lot of this doesn't add up. You've been quote unquote trying to lose weight for a while, and it's not working out. And then they break down and they say this happened, that happened. And then I'm able to kind of walk them through some of the stuff that we just talked about. Like, I didn't learn this from anybody in the nutrition field. I just happened to, do a deep dive myself, and ended up landing on people similar to what you're talking about. People like David Deutsch, and people that I just think when you start to explore outside of the content that you're spoon fed from the industry that you're in, you end up finding a lot of parallels, and you end up finding what I would kind of refer to as like universal laws that are applicable across the board to everything. And then sometimes people are like, well, what in the hell are you talking about now? Because they're like, hey, I thought this was calories in, calories out. And it's like, well, it sometimes can be. It sometimes can have to do with exercise. It sometimes can have to do with the food, but oftentimes it's just going to have to, we're really just dealing with human behavior. And human behavior is very expensive. If you look at why do we have police officers, and why do we have so many different things? It's like, because we have to deal with human behavior, and trying to figure out how to, like, people kind of know in general how they should act. But there's that, we have polarity, we have
That one's really debatable, Mark.
Yeah.
Be another separate podcast,
Yeah, no, well, it can be, but I think that I think that there's at least some stuff that I'll say it this way. I think there's some stuff that a good percentage of the population would probably agree upon, and you're 100% correct. It would matter, like, where these people grew up. It would matter their religious beliefs, their preconceived notions would matter. But like, if you threw if you're an adult and you threw a rock as hard as you could at a little kid's head, I mean, I think most people would say, hey, look, that, nothing seems fair about that. But then somebody else can add some conjecture to that puzzle and say, hey, what if that little kid pushed a baby into traffic and killed a baby? Like, there's somebody else who might say, hey, like, I want to see that kid get hurt because of what they did. But anyway, I just think that so many things come down to human behavior. And I think within us are the answers. And I think ultimately, in your research, my research, the research, of someone like Paul Chek, really all it does is just highlights what he already probably knew inside of him from day one. Because we have this kind of intuition, this gut feeling. And I think we inherently know some of the right things to do, but then somebody puts it into a language that is like, resonates with us, that's beautiful to us, where we're like, that's what I've been trying to say. Or that's what like, you read some of these books, and sometimes you're like, give yourself a pat on the back, because you're like, I've been thinking a lot of these thoughts forever, but a lot of times too, you're attracted to it because, these are thoughts that you've been thinking, and it's going to align with your thoughts. It goes even further than that, but that's how I always end up in these psychological conversations.
Well, what's your take? I have this hypothesis that I've been working on. What's your take on, can you be healthy living in civilized society? I would argue that it's still kind of like a hypothesis basically, but I would argue like you can't because for a myriad of reasons, but I don't want to take it away from you. What's your take? Can you be healthy living in like civilized society? Can you optimize your mental and physical health?
Yeah, we would have to establish, what we mean by healthy. Like, can you live to be, to be the age of whatever the average like death rate is or whatever. You live to be, if it's men, it's like 76 or 80 or whatever, right? I guess healthy to me would be, well, it's really hard to define, but I guess in my case it would be, like I had children, and I'm really happy and pleased to be living this life with them and to have kind of taken back my own health. I'm very proud of that. Having some success in business and earning some financial freedom is nice in a sense that it gives you some convenience and gives you some peace of mind, but not necessarily the healthiest thing because more money, more problems type thing. But in general, to try to answer that question the best, I do think so. And I think one of the key components to that is to not allow yourself to accumulate on anything, not allow yourself to accumulate on anything that you would agree is not serving you well. So the overconsumption of the internet, the overconsumption of social media, the overconsumption of pornography, the overconsumption of food. We are big time consumers, and you're consuming what you consume doesn't have to become your outcome, but it ultimately will become your outcome if all you're ever doing is consuming. So if you're watching porn every day, like, I'm sorry, like that's going to turn into something that's probably not great because it's probably going to, excuse the pun, probably going to pull on something else in your life and be a factor that may be detrimental, may lead to you missing out on just some really good opportunities. Whether your heart is healthy and your brain and some of these things, I think we're seeing, a good amount of people do it. I do wonder, well, if we make it to 2050, then we reach singularity and we don't have to worry about this anymore, right?
Maybe. I'm going to save this episode and I'll replay it back. I should be alive by that year still. So.
Yeah, I think all we have to do is make it there, and then we can live forever, and we can talk about this topic in the in the future. Maybe we'd have to be sent back in time to destroy this episode because of everything we revealed on here is so valuable.
I'll start playing the Terminator theme song at this point when I re-edit it. It's like dun, 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 dun.
I really love and appreciate this kind of conversation. I know that like some of my fans of like the powerlifting days and stuff, they're not always so happy about it, but I think it's important to really explore your mind and explore, what's the root, what's at the root, like let's solve the problems on the level at which they exist, or at least search for them there, and dig around on it. What was the name of that author of that book that you said? I got to check this guy out.
He has like a bunch of books, but his name is Dr. Stefan Walensky. My favorite is probably The Way of the Human, like volume 2 and 3. Volume 1 is good as well. He probably has like 30 books. I only read maybe like 7 of them or 8 of them at this point. Really, really interesting stuff. And I feel I've never seen anyone go like as deep as he has in the field of psychology. At least I haven't. Maybe there are some people out there, but I haven't. And a lot of the people I present his work to, other like doctors in psychology, they always agree with me that would be the case as well. So really highly, really interesting work.
It's nice to know that there's still people out there that kind of represent being multiple things. I think our the Stoics and some of these people that we looked up to from a long time ago are people that were, studying the stars and studying the earth and studying the sea, but also they were philosophers. They were inventors. They were creating that kind of stuff. We don't really see or hear much of it anymore. I think a lot of times those things just like somebody like a David Deutsch that I'm mentioning, like he's not Michael Jordan, he's not put up on a pedestal, or he's not Tom Brady. He doesn't throw touchdown passes. He's not big and jacked. He's skinny, and doesn't, like a lot of these people don't look like savior of the world, but they might have ideas and concepts that are that clear things up so well for us that maybe it'd be possible to avoid certain conflicts. Maybe it would be easier to solve problems. I mean, if imagine if the guy that you're talking about was the president during COVID, like what would have, like it brings up some interesting questions. Not like he would have been able to save the world from it, but there's always a better way, and that's what I'm always in search of. So if I have to listen, I'll listen to some really boring stuff. I'm sure you must have done it before. I'm not much of a reader, so I usually listen to books or listen to podcasts and stuff. But I will sift through stuff that makes me want to almost drive off the road sometimes.
Well, this is not a strategy of how to get to sleep at night,
Yeah, I will dig through it because I know that there's something in there that's worth it. And I think we need more people that are that are open to criticism and conjecture to get to the right answers. We need to fail fast, and we need to figure stuff out as quickly as possible. We need to get more people that say, hey, you know what? I had that theory the other day, and I need to come back and tell you all that I was incorrect. I'd like to change my answer. Those are always the smartest people.
I feel like, especially with
strong
this,
enough to do that.
Yeah, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like especially with this COVID thing, I mean, it just makes sense. Like, for example, like the whole universal healthcare thing was big, like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something with Obama. And I was like, man, like if you just took like literally a small fraction of the amount of money that a universal healthcare system would cost and reinvested basically, for lack of a better phrase, into brainwashing kids from elementary school through high school on how to, have basic movement, how to have like injury-free movement throughout the day, how to have nonviolent forms of communication, like what real food is, what chronic stress is and how to avoid it. Just in those things, if they just got like an amateur understanding of those topics, not only will you at the same time be able to have a universal healthcare system because a lot less people would use it, but you would also just have like a much more health conscious and just healthy population overall. Because right now, last time I checked, obesity costs America $200 billion a year, cost the American taxpayer, $200 billion every single year. Like you could just reinvest that money into health education in the school and it would solve itself. And who knows how much money it would save long term. I don't know if you agree with that, like that basic outlook. I don't know, for me, it's like common sense. But when I bring it up to like some people, they think I'm like crazy, like, what do you mean we don't need like all this medicine that hasn't been making any people much healthier anyways, I'm like,
I think it's a magnificent point. And I think that what you're doing is you're kind of rewinding stuff. You're like, okay, washing your hands sounds like a good idea. I'm on board with that. Okay, wearing a mask, that's not that bad. I can do that. Stay 6 feet apart from people. All right, I can handle that.
Mark, can you speak a little closer to the mic?
Oh, yep, gotcha. I think a lot of times, people are thinking of, they're thinking of like immediate solutions. So yeah, washing your hands isn't a bad idea. Wearing a mask isn't a bad idea. Staying 6 feet apart is not a bad idea. But what if we could go back and try to make it so that even if for some reason someone didn't wash their hands, and if I did shake somebody's hand, and if I wasn't 6 feet apart and I forgot my mask, that a lot of it, not necessarily irrelevant, but a lot of it may matter less if we're healthier going into these things. And where it would matter even less is that the person that you shook the hands with, if they were practicing the same thing, they're most likely not sick either.
Mm-hmm.
What happened with COVID-19, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but at some point, I just think they can't keep a lid on this thing for too long. I just think it was a really overhyped dramatization of a lot of people did die from it. So it's like every time I say this, people are like, what about the people that died? Like, I know a lot of people have died, but that's actually very open to interpretation as well. And the science, I don't know if we'll ever figure out how many people actually died from it. But in addition to that side of it, I just think that people getting tested for something that they don't even feel symptoms of is just really odd to me. I have a hard time. I understand, people are like, they want to get tested
to see if they should
keep distance away from other people because they may be asymptomatic and they may have something and then pass it on to an elderly family member. But I think a lot of these things could be avoided by doing some of the stuff that you're saying. Just be a healthy person. Be a person that tries to live a healthy lifestyle. If you have somebody in your family that you're concerned about, maybe stay away from them for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you were to get tested, you get tested every week.
And then there's a lot of false positives, and the testing, from what I hear, the testing is still not very good. I listened to a guy named Ivor Cummins and a few other people, and I've had a lot of people on my podcast who are way smarter than me about this type of stuff come on and just say, look, when they test, the test is, is only testing this certain thing, and a certain thing could show that they have COVID, even when have previous vaccines. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can make it show up. So I think the measures that we took were kind of based on a lot of things that were overblown, I guess I'd say.
I remember even Elon Musk posted one time on his Twitter, he got tested for COVID like 4 times in a row by the same device, same nurse, etc. And they came back different like every time.
Yeah, there's things like that. And what I mentioned in the very beginning, and I don't consider myself like a rocket scientist or anything, but I just said, whoever's in charge and whoever, can make the decisions on this, if it's President Trump or whoever. And I shot a video about it and I posted it, and people got pretty pissed. But I just said, basically, I think they should try to get the leading experts in the world together, and but not just experts in the field, get people that are outside the field. And why not have Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and some of these people? Who knows how to ship stuff better than Jeff Bezos? Do you think Jeff Bezos is not going to be able to get enough vaccines out to people? I mean, these people they have so much money and so much power. The United States government has relied on people like this in our history. So I was kind of disappointed to see that we didn't kind of Manhattan Project this thing and, pull some of the smartest people that we possibly could. And not just in the United States, but in the world, for the world. There's a world pandemic, not just the United States. So I'm kind of shocked that something like that wasn't at least examined. What would it hurt?
Yeah. Well, Mark, do you have any closing statements that you want to include before we cut it off?
No, man. Thank you so much for your love the questions. And it's great to talk about some different things that aren't just that aren't only fitness. I like talking about lots of stuff.
Yeah, which is cool. So I was like, oh man, I don't want to have like another. How many reps should I do to increase my 1 rep max? Conversation.
Right.
I'm sure he has a lot more to offer than that. So I appreciate it, man, and thank you for your time. And it's honestly like really good to meet you. Been following you for a while, so happy to finally get a chance to chat with you.
I guess I would like to say one thing in closing here is that like some of the stuff we talked about when we're talking about, your interpretation of things, and even when we talked about food, we talked about the 10-minute walks. We didn't really talk much about the sunlight or vitamin D or any of that kind of stuff, but share these things with your kids. Get outside with your children. If you're somebody that's listening to this and you have kids, or if you don't have kids, if you have parents that live close by, see if you can get them to go with you. I walk with my dad just about every single morning from about 6 to 7 p.m. every morning. It's a great time for us to get together, have some conversation. The sun's not always out at that time, so we don't always get our vitamin D at that time, but it just brings us closer together. Take out the family dog, get with your son, get with your daughter, whoever you got, a friend, anybody. You have a family member that's overweight, or that wants to get back in shape. They have a bad back or bad this or bad that, and we all know people like this. Call them up, text them, say, hey, let's instead of meeting them for lunch or meeting for coffee, or we can't really meet people the same way that we were able to before, but I don't think anybody's going to stop you from getting up a 10-minute walk. And the foods that you eat and the different things that you're learning on podcasts and from a podcast like this, share those with your kids. They're never too young to learn some of these things. I think the younger that they are, that they learn some of this stuff, the better place that we'll end up living in. So have it.
Cool. Well, thanks again, Mark. I'll include all your info in the description section if anyone wants to contact you. Okay.
Great. Thanks again. I appreciate it, man. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Evgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Evgeny Trufkin.